Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky Clarke, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I am super excited to welcome our newest and latest guest. Anne, would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and where you are in the world?
Sure. Thank you, Jacky. Just to be clear, my name is Ann Taliaferro. The last name looks like Taliaferro. It's a trick name. But I'm here in the lovely state of Maryland in Annapolis, which is home to the Naval Academy. It's a beautiful little historic town that I don't take advantage of enough because I'm working all the time. I am a therapist. I came into it late in the game. I finished my master's degree in 2021 and became a licensed therapist. I started out in substance abuse, addiction counseling, and worked in a lot of inpatient, outpatient treatment facilities, and then moved into private practice just after the pandemic. And we have a specialty where we work with addiction, trauma, and specifically sexual addictions and obsessive compulsive behaviors around that. So really fascinating, interesting, hard, intense work, but I love what I do. I landed in a really beautiful spot, and I love that I get to sort of be in that space with people. I've done some very specific grief, trauma certification and study and work for my own interest and purposes, as well as, so much of that stuff is all wrapped up together, trauma and addiction and grief and all the different layers. I used to say that being a substance abuse counselor, I could only have one part of the conversation with a client, and it only could be about recovery from substance abuse. And when I got licensed, I was able to expand that conversation into the layers underneath that I knew were there, but I didn't have the ethical purview to be able to talk about that stuff. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that's me.
Amazing. Welcome. So it's so wonderful to have you. I'm so excited to have this conversation. And as always, we always ask our guests to kind of take us back to where your healing started. So that might be like the journey, but then also like what was the moment where you were like, wow, this can't be my life. Like something has to change. And you like actually consciously started healing. So talk to me about those kind of the lead up to and then that conscious moment.
I'm very lucky, and I feel very, very blessed that that moment, that like aha, like, ooh, I can't keep going like this, happened for me when I was 19. And I was not happy about that moment at 19 or at 20 or at 21. But we were talking earlier, and I said I grew up in a very large family, and somewhere in that, and it's a really common story that I hear a lot. Somewhere in there, I felt different. I did not feel like I fit. I did not feel like I belonged. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of chaos. It was a lot of people. And what I know about myself today is that I am a highly sensitive being, and I absorbed a lot of stuff that I didn't know what to do with. And in my adolescence, that turned into a little oppositional defiance. And what I understand today about that is that really I felt very out of control in terms of the decisions that were being made for me and about me. And so my choice was to make really bad decisions. They, some of them I knew like this is a bad decision and I'm making it because I have control over it. And it confounded the rest of my family, but I quit school at a very early age. I sort of hit the ground running. There were some transitional changes. My parents moved and I started out in a new area and it didn't go well, but I found those people who are the easiest group to belong to, which is our fundamental goal and desire is to belong to a group, a community. That group in adolescence was the people who were smoking and drinking and, you know, doing all kinds of things. And it's easy to do that and then feel like you belong. So that's what I did. And I sort of ripped and ran. And uh, in clinical terms, I would be called a failure to launch, failure to thrive adolescent. I could not get any farther in my life. I tried to go to college and I failed miserably. I got a GED, so I got that far. But at 19, it sort of all came down to my mother had gotten a little Al-Anon under her belt and said, you can live any way you want to, you just can't live here. And several other sort of, magical, mystical, spiritual things sort of came together. And I'd been involved with somebody who kind of disappeared out of my life for a couple of months, and then I ran into him again, and he was going to meetings. He was going to AA meetings, and I had a lot of very confusing, very conflicting motives, but I asked him to take me to a meeting. And so the journey for me really started right there. And I did have a moment of suicidality. I got in my car one night and I tried to get as wasted as I could with the intention of running my tiny little Volkswagen Bug into a tree. And it didn't happen. But I still remember, even in the fog of all that, I still remember thinking, I'm only 19, and if this is it, I have to keep living like this. And I just couldn't. The hopelessness and the despair, I have never felt that feeling ever again, even in some of the worst moments since then. But I can go back to that girl and how I felt then and know that that was one of those sort of, I don't know if I prayed, I don't know what I did. I do believe that my mother prayed me into, she was a very devout Catholic. I am not, but I do believe that her faithfulness sort of had a key component in just how that unfolded because it was so rare back then. I was one amongst maybe three or four other people that were my age that were going to
Mm,
meetings, that were stepping into recovery, they're doing that. There are a lot more young people nowadays, which I love,
mm,
that people can get that opportunity to change. And there's a lot of different ways that they can do it nowadays. It's not we didn't have commercials for rehabs. We didn't have things on the radio. I knew nothing about what I was stepping into in this world, but I stepped into this world of really lovely, loving, caring people who really just kind of carried me and let me be a complete nutter for about the first 3 years of my recovery. I was really angry that I
mm,
was young. I wasn't even 21. Like I can't even legally drink yet. Not that I wasn't illegally drinking for a really long time before then, but all of that sort of ironed itself out. And I am really, really grateful today that that was where I landed. That was what was offered to me. I will say I have um, issues. I have some issues with 12-step recovery and the program, but it saved my life. I am forever indebted and grateful. I still go to meetings. I still sponsor people. I still am involved
mm,
in it. Um, I just, like anything, I don't necessarily buy everything that is sold. And they told me that I could do that when I walked in the door. They said, take what works for you, leave the rest.
Mm.
And that was a beautiful offering for me, because if you tried to cram something down my throat, my oppositional defiance still to this day will rear its ugly head and go, no, I don't have to do that.
Oh, absolutely. So really, really young, like in having this moment, which I think is, as you said, at the time, not great, but in the long run, really incredible because it gives you such a foundation for everything else that's to come and how you're then going to live your life and what that's all going to look like. And like, I always like to ask people, because I know for me and for a lot of the guests that I speak to, in that kind of like pinnacle moment, you have to kind of accept something about yourself. You have to accept that something, like for me, it was that I was in control of this and I was letting myself be that way. Like, what did you have to accept about yourself I mean, at 19, obviously, as you said, like still really young, like still under legal drinking age, like still under a lot of the decision making ages. Like, so like what did you have to accept about yourself to actually like start this process?
Well, I think there's two things that I think of right off the bat, and one is, and I say this to clients a lot. It's like I had a moment maybe 2 years in where I call it my Lieutenant Dan strapped to the mast of the shrimp boat moment, of which I've had a few, where I was quite literally standing across from the bar that I would sort of hide out in, my second home, and I wanted to go in, but I wanted to do it in the ignorant way that I used to. Like I didn't have any knowledge about what I was doing to myself or despite people telling me. I was like, this is all I know how to do kind of thing. And I didn't have that anymore. I had some not like, you will be making a very clear choice to self-destruct if you walk through those doors and you do that. And you can do that. You're not as powerless as you always thought that you were. I mean, I wrestled the power in that sort of, I'm going to make a bad decision and that's mine and I have some control over it. That was the moment when I recognized that, like, who are you actually fighting? You're
Mm.
really only fighting yourself. You're not fighting the world. You're just self-destructing. The world has hurt you and you've repeatedly punched yourself in the face, Ann. What are you doing? And the other
I love
one,
that. I
the
literally love
other
that. That's such a descriptive way of looking at it. I love that. Okay, tell me the other one. Oh my God, I love that.
The other one came when a little farther along, right in that sort of period of time between 2 and 3 years of recovery, I hit another bottom, and it had to do with relationships, and it had to do with coming down to like uh, you continue to pick the same person over and over again in the same way that you used to drink and think that it was going to be different, or use drugs and you keep thinking you're going to pick this one's different and they're going to treat you differently and they never do. Even the nice ones, you end up turning them into, and there's this story where they're always leaving you and you're always the victim. And it came to a head in a relationship that, again, like at the time it was terrible and awful and horrible, and looking back it was like it was everything that I needed to take that next step to the next level. And I had to sit down and I had to look at the pattern in my relationships and recognize where I was making the choice, and I wasn't a victim anymore. At that point it was like, you're not a victim, you're a volunteer. You're somehow unconsciously choosing. And what I know now today is our brains are big pattern seekers, and they don't necessarily judge whether it's a good pattern or a bad pattern. It's just that's familiar. And so those things that we say that are like, oh my God, I just felt like I knew him. I just felt like we just connected on this. It's like, well, What was familiar? Oh, it felt familiar to what was modeled for me, which wasn't great.
Mm.
So, so all of a sudden those pieces started to click together and I really went in for some very like, again, standing on the street corner having one of those, Lieutenant Dan moments, raging at God, and then kind of going, oh, okay, God always with me, God, whatever that means for you, God has always sort of gone, I've got this part in hand, but you have some work to do. I'm like, oh, I hate work.
Oh yeah. The thing is that like I think that for everyone going on this journey, you can only start actually healing and properly being responsible for your life when you realize that you are in control of way more than you actually let yourself be in control of. Like no choice is a choice. A bad choice or a destructive choice is a
Is a
choice.
choice.
Like there are so many moments, I guess, like that. And I kind of was finding the same thing when I was going through my own depression and, my own struggle. In I would be making bad choices that would be making me feel worse in the long run because in the moment it felt like I was winning. Like it felt like something, I was like, ha
It's in
ha ha.
control.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, and it's like this really like weird sensation when you actually start to recognize, as you said, that pattern. You start to recognize, like, I'm giving myself that like short-term like win for a long-term like pain. And that feeling of needing instant gratification right now to make myself feel better is actually not going to be the thing that makes me win time and time again for the rest of my life. So something has to give, something has to change, something has to be different. And I think for so many people, they get to that moment. And when you truly deeply start healing, you get to that moment where you say, actually, I am not a victim here. I can do something about this. I can change something about this. It doesn't mean that it just instantly gets easy because that's not a thing. There's still hard times, as we'll talk about in a second. But I think that it does
If you're
change
doing
the
it
dynamic.
correctly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you're doing healing correctly, there's hard times. 100%. Like 100%. And I think, like, again, I don't think that that's something that enough people actually talk about. And enough people actually say, like, if you're healing, like, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Like, you're going to be opening up Pandora's box and, like, shit's going to get real, real quick. And then after that, you're going to be, like, sorting it all out. And, all of the craziness is going to go into neat little boxes and it's going to be okay. But first, it has to all come out and then we can do something with it. And I always like to ask people like, okay, you've like done this thing, you've realized like you've embraced this whole change about yourself, and then like there's this idea that it's going to get easier now, and then it doesn't. Like, what were those moments like where like you're like, okay, well, I've made this big step forward and like now it should be easy, and then it wasn't. Like, how was that for you? Like, were there moments where you just thought like, I can't do this, like what is this?
Well, I think one of the things for me was that recognition of like that easy, that like this, when does this get easier? When does this get comfortable? Is an illusion. And that, like, the hardest part, and I say this a lot because this was a recognition for me, like the relationship that I was in, that I came out of, that I finally made the choice to come out of.
Mhm.
Like, that's what was being presented to me was like, this isn't going to leave you until you actually make a choice to step away. For the first time, you're the one leaving the thing behind and you're choosing you over everyone else for the first time, which I think for women, I see that as a really difficult thing. We will forfeit our choice for ourselves for everyone else. And so that was a huge lesson for me in that one. And then the recognition that if I am really doing this healing thing correctly, it's going to feel pretty shitty. It will get better. I will get better. I really hate, like every time I hear it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's like, well, then I'm a superhero. I hate that phrase. but you do build a level of resilience. I don't like the makes you stronger. I like the makes you more resilient because and to me that implies flexibility and ability to face adversity, ability to sort of move with the flow of, rather than I am a by nature immediately resistant person. Still in my head, if it's coming up, the first thing that's going to happen is, oh hell no.
Mm.
No. Hey, do you want it? No, I don't say it out loud anymore. I slow it down and I like, wait, what's actually being asked of you in this moment? Is this going to be a hard moment? We can do hard things. I love Glennon Doyle on that statement. We can do hard things, right? I know that about myself. That's the gift of, going into this process young and knowing that, I am way more resilient than I think I am. I'm way more capable of walking through things than I think I am. I still get mad about it. I still get, like, when does it get easier and more comfortable? I'm in my freaking 60s. Does it get, but I have a little sticker on my computer here that says comfort zone will kill you.
Mm.
Because for me, what I recognize in my life, in my learning, in my healing journey is that I have a brain that seeks comfort. It seeks the easier, softer way. The way that it will do that is usually and typically for me really maladaptive. Like I will eat a bag of chocolate, which I did over the weekend because I'm in some grief. And I will know that I'm going to feel like crap afterwards when I went for it's like the least of the things that I could choose, but I will still, but I know that the bigger payoff for me is in the challenge of not seeking the comfort. And I say challenge really specifically because I will whine and cry and complain about the struggle.
Mm.
And it hit me a few years back when I was in the middle of trying to finish my master's degree and trying to avoid my own self-sabotage thing that I do unconsciously. And I realized that when I hit the wall, I am going into the struggle language. I'm going into the I want to quit. This is too hard. I can't do this. That language. And I have to pull it back and slow it down and have a different conversation with myself that says, this is challenging. This is the most challenging moment for you. You knew it would come, but you can do challenge. I can do challenge. And I've used that with my clients as well. It's like you have to think about the neuro-linguistic aspect of how I talk to myself, how we talk to ourselves, because I can take myself up the mountain or I can throw myself right off the cliff in here in 5 minutes.
Mm. Mm.
And
It's
so I
so
have
true.
to be, a friend of mine says, I constantly have to be on to myself.
Mm. Yeah, but it is like your brain is the thing that's with you all the time. And like I always used to say to people, like when I started to go on this healing journey and I actually started to recognize my thoughts and understand what was going on and look at how my nervous system was working and all of these things, I suddenly realized that I am literally my own biggest bully. Like I am so mean to myself so much of the time. And I'm always telling myself why I didn't do it right and why I could have done it better and why, I'm not good enough and why everyone else is better than me. And like just shaming myself and going on this like guilt trip after guilt trip after guilt trip, like just continuously. And it was so interesting as you kind of go on that journey and the more that you learn about how your brain reacts and how it doesn't actually know if the things that are being said are inside your head or outside your head. So it doesn't know whether you're saying it to yourself or somebody else is saying it to you. So it starts to paint this picture that this is what the world thinks of you, that this is the belief of everybody around you, when actually it's not, that's not true. Like it's not true. but because you say it to yourself so often, and it's so interesting because like I remember when I was going through my healing and I was like at my lowest in my depression, like people would give me compliments. So people in my in my life, I would go out somewhere and they would say, oh my gosh, you look so beautiful, and in my head I would instantly be correcting the statement, oh, they're only saying that to me because of this and this and this. They don't actually believe that. Like my body literally could not
Take
take
it in.
somebody being positive around me because I was in such a place of negativity that it was so foreign to me for anybody to say anything. And I remember when I finally started healing, my older sister was like, write down a list of nice things about yourself. And I literally sat there just staring at a blank piece of paper, going, I don't know what she's talking about. Like, I don't know what she's on about. So then I went back to her and I was like, yeah, this is really hard. Like, I can't do this. I can't do this. I don't know what you want from me. And she came back to me. I think it was the first time that she realized how bad I actually was, and she was properly concerned. And she came back to me and she wrote this list for me. And she like this list was absolutely beautiful. Like she wrote this list about like how beautiful I am and how wonderful I am and special and like all of the amazing things about me and like this like beautiful list. And she was like, even if you don't believe it, I just want you to read this list out loud to yourself just once a day. Just read it out loud. She was like, even if you have to start every sentence with Dom says, and like, it has to come from me. She was like, I just want you to do this. And that was literally like a turning point for me
Ugh.
because suddenly I was speaking nice things to myself every single day. And like at first it was like really weird and I was like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. Then it got more comfortable. And then I was doing it like twice a day. And then I was doing it like three times a day. And then I was doing it anytime that I felt bad. And like literally it became like my little ritual of like, this is how I'm going to change my life. Like this is going to be the starting point. And I think
Yes.
like, and I still have the list now. Like I still have the list in my cupboard. I keep it. But it's like this amazing thing where your brain has so much power, and yet for most of us, we don't utilize it. We don't do anything with it. We don't pay attention to it. We just let it run on autopilot with these messages that are, where those messages originated from, I have no idea. Who said
Oh.
them to me? Like where did they come from? Like, I mean, none of that really matters in the long run, but it's that thing of like, actually, that is all things that I am in control of. I am in control of what is in my head. I am in control of how I process and what I say to myself and how I perceive what other people say to me. So if people say to me, if somebody says to me now, oh, you're ugly, I can be like, okay, that's their opinion. Like, I don't really care what they have to say. And it's like such a different mindset from where I was at that like beginning of the journey. And I know that you said that you're a therapist, obviously, and you've got quite a few qualifications in all of these different areas. And the work that you do sounds absolutely incredible. Like, that's so wonderful. Can you tell me how you got to that point from, 19-year-old going on a recovery journey to in your 60s now doing this incredible like therapy rehab work for people who are in some of the most tough situations that they're going through? Like, how did you decide that this is what you wanted to do? Was it a conscious decision? How did you end up here? Like, tell me what happened.
It was another one of those sort of seminal kind of life moments that you go, well, that was terrible, but look at all the great stuff that came out of that. And it was like being a counselor was something I thought about in my 20s and started to pursue when I went back to school. But there was a point that it didn't feel right. And so I sort of went in a different direction. I'm glad that I did because I see a lot of young people in their early recovery, like going into the field, and it's hard. It's a really hard field to go into. It's hearing a lot of trauma and tragedy every single day, and having to really have a sense of your personal, being able to shield and do a lot of very intentional things that I learned how to do. So I actually went into a more sort of artistic background for about 25 years. And I got an interior design degree and I worked in a lot of, I tell people I had 100 different jobs, um, all of them with some sort of creative aspect to them. And I enjoyed all of the things that I did. They did not fulfill me in a really core, passionate way. Like I would always sort of get to a point where it was like, okay, well, I'm painting a mural for somebody who has a lot of money. It's not, I'm not doing life-saving work here. Where I got that was in my recovery. It was working with people and, being involved in a lot of sort of community things and that gave me a lot of satisfaction. When I think it was 2008, my husband underwent some chemotherapy to treat some stuff that some health issues he was going through, and he had a really bad reaction to it, and I came close to losing him. My daughter was about 16, and it was just a really, really terrifying time in our lives. We call it the tsunami summer of 2008 because my husband was the primary breadwinner. It wiped us out financially. It like our tiny little family of three became very close in a way that I wouldn't wish on anyone because of what was happening. But we bonded and, sort of held everything together. I was working for someone who, I will say still to this day, all these years later, is the worst boss I ever had. She was just, um, a level of narcissism that was really, really abusive. And coming up against that in the middle of going through this really, really hard thing. The tail end of that was an incredibly beautiful vacation with my family. My husband was starting to sort of turn the corner and get better. And on the last day of our vacation, my daughter and I went for our like last walk on the boardwalk at one of the local beaches here, and we got hit by a drunk driver. And yeah. And I was conscious the entire time. He did not, he was maybe doing 35, 40. He went into a bike path that we were walking in, trying to get around people. And my daughter got injured. I didn't realize that she got injured initially. We walked out of the hospital that night, but she'd had a concussion. She still doesn't remember anything to this day. I remember everything. And it was just like trauma on top of trauma. And at that point, going back into my job, I guess a week into my job, my boss looked at me and was like, "Why are you having such a hard time? Like you're making mistakes at work and you're having," and I just looked at her and went, I got run over by a car a week ago, right? I don't know if I told you. I, and she really didn't get it. So at that point, I was like, I don't have, I had my mother's voice in my head going, don't quit a job until you have another job sort of thing. And I was like, the one thing I know about myself is I know how to work and I know how to work very hard. I'd been doing it since I was 16. And I just sort of got to the point where I was like, I have to get out of here. And at the same time, I had a friend that I had done a lot of work with. We used to run a paint department in a hardware store together. And she called me up and she said, there's a program called Extreme Home Makeover. And she said they're doing a house close to here, just outside of Washington, D.C. And do you want to volunteer? And I was like, yes. So I called in sick. It wasn't very not a lot of integrity in it, but I called in sick and I went and I volunteered on this site and you just did whatever needed to be done. And, we painted or we picked up trash or we whatever. And it was all voluntary and everybody was just in this space of giving. And it was beautiful. And it made me go, my life has to be about something bigger and deeper than whether or not someone's ottoman got to them in time for their Christmas party. I just don't care anymore. I don't care about your curtains. I don't care about like all of that just sort of disappeared. And I went back that following week and I resigned from my job. I didn't have another one lined up, but I knew how to paint and I knew how to, do a lot of subcontractor stuff. And I had enough family and friends that threw work my way and helped my family out. And I went and got a part-time job. Um, I got two part-time jobs actually, and one of them was in a treatment center, and it was like the lowest paying job at the treatment center. But I went and I became a treatment aide, and from the very first day that I started that job, because I thought if I'm going to go back to school for this, that was the moment I decided to go back to school. If I'm going to go back to school for this, I should probably go and see if I even want to spend my time around recovering addicts all day long. And from the very first day, it was, I'm sure you've had this where you just have a moment where you know that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Your head, heart, gut, everything lines up, and you're like, I think this is what they talk about serenity feeling like. Like it's pure chaos all around me, but I'm like, I, I
Like,
am
I feel good.
exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that. And like I think sometimes going through such a journey to get to the place that you're supposed to be is actually the point. Like, yes, you could have become a counselor when you were 20 and it probably wouldn't have had the same impact in the long run. You wouldn't have had the same life experience and knowledge and empathy and ability to actually have, be the healer, like, the counselor and therapist that you are now. Like, I think that there's such a magic in that, like going through the things and then being able to help people on the other side of that. And I love to ask people, and like you can do this from whatever angle you want. So you can either do this from like the clients that you work with, like in that recovery space, or you can do this from like general somebody who's struggling at the moment and starting a healing journey. But what would your advice be for somebody who is trying to start this journey, trying to, create a better life for themselves, trying to show up in a different way? And they just, they want to get started, they want to get moving. Like, what would your advice be to people like that?
Well, there's a couple of points that I hit on with people because I worked in inpatient treatment. Like the hardest thing for me going into private practice was, oh, I get to slow everything down. Like I may have you as a client for years. Whereas I came from, 21 days, 10 days, like I called it triage treatment, where it's like we got to find the things quickly. I got very good at hearing the story and going, okay, I see a couple of points in here that we need to address right away. We need to stem the bleeding and then get you the proper help when you leave, kind of thing. And some of my clients from that have followed me and, they sought me out afterwards because they were like, you really connected with the stuff underneath. And I feel safety is the biggest thing in any kind of relationship with a client, right? So they come in and they're like, I want you to fix me. And I'm like, okay, well, first we're going to start with this is going to be an uncomfortable journey, and there will be highs and lows in the journey. One of the things um, that I say to clients, particularly in the addiction realm, because it's a very unique brain. I mean, I think all of our brains are kind of assholes, but the addictive brain thinks completely backwards. And so what I hit people with right away is I'm not really interested in what you want because what you want is to try to feel comfortable as quickly as possible and to skirt any discomfort on your way there. I don't care about that. I'm interested in what you're willing to do to get better. Because, as we said before, if you're doing this correctly, it's going to be uncomfortable and you have to buy into the discomfort. It's going to suck, and I'm going to teach you how to embrace the suck.
Mm,
and make friends with it and be able to walk with it. And because you're going to have to understand that, what lives in me, there is a part of me that is a complete asshole. And if I do not pay attention to her, if I do not let her tell me how she's feeling, she will come in and she'll flip the table over and she'll flip everybody the bird and walk out and go punch herself in the face and do something really destructive and dumb. And I don't really want to give her that opportunity. She does need to have a voice. I mean, and I allow her to come up when it's a stand up for yourself in this moment, Anne. You
mm,
can let her out. You can let her out to go, no, this is not okay. This moment is not okay. I do not like what's happening here, and I'm going to create a boundary. Like, that's a great place
mm,
for her. If I don't give
mm,
her that space, and there are some places where it's like, oh, I wish I'd let her out because she needed to be here in that moment, you know?
mm,
So it's really kind of going in for that. And I'll repeat that a lot with people. Like, oh, we're in that place where we're feeling entitled and we're feeling like we deserve something we don't really deserve. Let's go back into that uncomfortable place because you're not done with that yet. So it's the learning to embrace the discomfort. I meet a lot, what I see a lot in, particularly in addiction, is there is this path from that place of powerlessness that turns into a place of resentment, that then feeds into a place of entitlement. And whatever we found that eases that tension is
mm,
the entitlement becomes the excuse for the maladaptive behavior.
mm.
It's the effort part of and everybody, any addict I've ever met will tell you they get to the point where it's like effort, and that's where they'll tell you, then I don't have a choice.
Mm.
Once I've made that decision and I've said that, I don't have a choice anymore. And I've had lots and lots and lots of clients tell me, well, once I've made up my mind, nothing can change it. And I'm like, well, the job, my friend, is to learn how to change your mind
Mm.
because you're going to be a victim of your mind for the rest of your life if you don't learn how to do that. You have to turn it inward. It's not really about anything going on out here. It's not about those people who I think don't like me. I don't actually even know them, and I've never asked them. So it's really my projection of myself on them.
I love that idea of like you're going to be stuck with your mind your whole life. So you need to have some kind of control over it. And then 9 times out of 10, what you are feeling is a projection of what you are putting out into the world. Like it's the lens you're looking at the world through rather than what is outside coming
Actually,
in.
yeah,
Like actually, it's people, it's you, how you feel, what you think is possible in the world, what you think isn't possible, what you think you're worthy of, all of that wrapped up into this bundle of then how you behave. Because I always love that thought process that people say that, well, I had no control. Like I thought this thing and then I took this action. And I'm like, okay, I hear that, I hear you, but your thoughts are not actions. So if
right.
you have a thought and then it ends up being an action, you made a decision in that process at some point. You made a conscious decision to say this this thought is now going to become an action.
Yeah,
Like I think regularly while I'm driving, oh my God, I could kill that person. I don't actually go and kill that person. I let them drive on their merry way and carry on with my day. But actually, just because you have a thought doesn't mean that it has to become a behavior in the world. It doesn't mean it has to become an action in the world. And I think a lot of people, when they're in that victim mentality, get really stuck in that place where they're like, oh, well, you know, well, this is what I was thinking. And then I just did the thing. And I don't know. I don't know how to break that cycle of
next thing
thinking
I
and doing.
knew, it's like,
Yeah, next thing I knew, I was
the
done.
thought
And I,
carried me away like a riptide, and I was caught in it, and I couldn't. And I'm like, well, there's a way to get out of a riptide too. And it is to swim with the, it's like, don't fight it. Stop fighting it, swim with it. The tide will bring you in. There is even I would tell people all the time, because one of the things for me was like, I want to gauge your level of willingness. Like, if you're not there yet, I don't have any judgment against that. If you don't want to stop, let's talk about that. I just want to know how much effort I'm gonna go into with you on this journey. Because if I find myself working harder for your recovery than you are, I'm going to step out, because my experience in the past is that I then get frustrated and resentful at you. And it's not really you, it's your addiction. And I can separate the two because I've been in this game long enough. And my credentials are bigger in the I've lived in long-term recovery. Like, that gives me more credibility than my licensure or my clinical whatever. When I'm looking at the addict who's telling me I can't see my life any other way, and I'm like, but I can. I can see it, and I can tell you it's not, there are bumps in the road, but they're going to be bumps anyway. It's a matter of, like, if the fire is there, are you going to now add gasoline to it with your behavior, or are you going to actually bring, the ability to smother and put the fire out? Like, we don't have to continue to burn the house down every time we get a feeling we don't like. And, you
Mm.
know, that's a thing, because what I'd see in chronic relapse a lot of times was, and it goes back to trauma, is that chaos becomes so normalized when we've experienced trauma that oftentimes what I will see with people is that when things then become stable and normal, our chaos brains don't know what to do with that. So my analogy for that would be, there's that saying, like, I'm just waiting for the next shoe to drop. And I would say, we wait and we wait and we wait, and everything is fine. Everything is actually going the way that we intellectually know that it should. But our nervous system is waiting for the next shoe to drop. And it becomes so excruciating that I will then take the shoe rack, throw it on the floor, pour gasoline on it, light it on fire. Part of my brain goes, what are you doing, Anne? But the survival part of my brain is sitting back in a lounge chair with a beer and a cigarette going, yes. Yeah, there we go.
And then you come around and you say to yourself, well, I told you that was going to happen. I told
Right.
you. I
Right.
told you it was going to
See,
happen.
I
We
knew I couldn't
create
do
a
this. Right. There's the failure. There's the I beat myself up. Yeah. And the cycle begins, and we're caught in that. So that's another thing that I'll talk to people about. I will talk to them about, like, you can improve really quickly. That can also be a bad thing. Like, that trajectory of everything's great, I don't know how to receive great. It was like you talking about people, saying nice things about you and not being able to take that in. It's like, not ready, not quite there yet. Haven't opened that door up yet. I had a trip in my 40s. I felt very compelled to take it. I hadn't ever traveled by myself. And so I went to this wellness place in Costa Rica to do like a 7-day mind, body, spirit. I don't, I'm not a big yoga person, but I felt like I'd had a business with a person that sort of fell apart, and I lost a friendship as a result of it. And I was kind of grieving that and going through some changes. And I just sort of needed to do this thing to show myself I could step out in the world. I'm sure you
Mm.
understand, it's like, again, that choosing myself. And in that healing journey, you're going to come up on these moments where it's like, am I making my choices because of other people, or where am I in all of this, as a mom and a wife and a daughter, and all these roles that we play. And so I went to this place, and I felt compelled to do it, but I wasn't quite sure why. And I ended up, meeting lots of really wonderful people, and made a point of, like, sitting in a different seat at meal times each time. Like I really made the effort to step out of my comfort zone. And at one point, there were all sorts of different yoga places that come to this retreat space and hold their retreats. And I was just there as an individual, but they invite you into all of their other things. So I went into this moment where we did, it's such a ridiculous story, but it's it's indicative of the healing journey because they presented this like there is a type of meditation retreat where you do this in silence for 10 days. And they've taken this into prisons and they've taken this into all sorts of different places. And so they were talking about this, and then they were talking about you can do 3-day versions of this. We're going to do a little abbreviated, sort of a 6 hour, they said 12 hours, but we started in the evening. So then we all went to bed. So we woke up the next morning and had our little in silence tags. I don't know if you can tell, but my mother will say I talk wallpaper off the wall. So like the whole silent thing was like, whoa, there's a challenge. Like don't distract yourself. We're going to do yoga and we're going to walk meditation and we're going to do all of these things. And at the very end of this, we did our final, set of yoga moves, and then we're laid out in savasana. You're relaxing, and you're the best part of yoga for me anyway. And Jackie, it is so dumb. I got a little tickle in my throat, right? Breathe something in. We're up in this altitude, whatever. I get this little tick, and I tell myself, you can't cough. You can't cough, Ann. You can't disrupt everyone's silence by coughing. And I don't know if you've ever tried to like not cough or like not sneeze, like what your body does, how it responds. It's not good. So I tried to get off of the yoga mat and go to one of the sliding doors, of which there were many, and leave and just sort of step outside and get some water. And I couldn't, like, they were all locked. I couldn't find the one that would open. So in the meantime, I'm holding this coffin and I'm feeling my face on fire and my chest on fire. And I go from like, don't cough and disrupt these people to, if you cough, these people are going to hate you. In fact, they probably already do. Like everybody hates you anyway. So, like don't disrupt, don't, like be small, don't cough. And I end up going back to the blanket. I'm literally like holding my breath at this point. And my everything is on fire in my brain. And my brain is just exploded with negativity. And when it finally ends, I run outside and I cough and I go get some water. And we then go to lunch. And I sit down across from one woman who's also in silence. I just sit down across from her. And immediately in my head, well, she hates you. And finally, after all of this, just insanity. I mean, my brain just exploded with insanity. And finally, up from the bottom of that, and this is the part that's like we all have to get there, where this part of me comes up and goes, "What are you talking about?" Like this is a complete fabrication in your mind. All of these people have been nothing but lovely to you. No one has said anything mean to you. This is you, Anne. This is you. This is your internal messaging system. Walking around in the world thinking this all the time. Like it finally, the purpose for being there was just to be quiet enough for all of that to come forward and me to have to look at it and go, yeah, no, all of that is a story. It's a story you locked into and that you bought into. Again, it's like getting rid of the illusion, that attachment to the illusion that we emotionally invest in.
Mhm.
A lot of what I see in anxiety all the time when I go, well, tell me what the story is. It's all future focused, it's disastrous, and it only includes maybe one or two factual things. And so in my household, because my husband has a lot of anxiety and depression, and he'll do that. He'll go on the full on like, then we get to the end of it and it's like, wow, that's a story you're telling yourself. And I said that enough times to him that now he just automatically he'll go all the way through it and he'll go, wow, that's a story I'm telling myself. And there's,
I love
there's
that.
typically like, this huge broad brush painted, and you know that you're cognitively distorting things when you're saying like everyone and no one and all the time and ever and never and forever, and because none of those things actually exists. So a lot of what I'm doing with people is just sort of, like tell me the story and then go and then just sort of going, okay, right there is an interesting statement. Let's explore that a little bit more because your thoughts are not things.
Mm.
They do not become things until we take an action with them. So there's so much more that I could just leave at the table. And that experience in Costa Rica was that was one of those reckoning with myself, reckoning with that internalized, like it's I think of it like just a sort of a ticker tape, like you see the news stuff that runs along it. It's just negative. It's just blah, 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 because our survival brains actually control us more than we are typically aware of most of the time. And as my friend, I was talking to my friend in Wales yesterday, and she said, "Yeah, I'm learning to ride the saber-toothed tiger." Like, oh, I like that. I'm gonna find the
Yeah,
saber-toothed tiger and I'm gonna ride it.
I love that. That is again like such a great image for this process and what it entails, like what it entails. Oh my gosh. Okay, so final question of the podcast. I always love asking people, like, what is your next level of healing? So, what is the thing that you're focusing on at the moment that you are, healing through?
Um, Well, it's funny that we made this change and we had this set up for today because last Monday my mom passed away, and she's the last parent. She's the of my husband and I. Like all the parents are gone, and my mother was a matriarch, and um she was just a force of nature, and we had a difficult time early on when I was younger, but as I said, I do believe that her prayers got me through a lot of things. I believe that part of the reason she made it okay for her to go was because she knew I was content in my life. All of her kids were doing okay. All of her grandkids, everything was okay. It's not a bad thing, but it's always that return to the grief process, which always it's been really interesting from I had a friend in recovery many years ago during the height of AIDS who passed away, and it was probably one of the most spiritual experiences with death I've ever had. It opened me up to this idea of this thing that I was so afraid of, but I was risking my life every day with my behavior, and the paradox of when you finally accept that it's inevitable and it's not to be feared, you start to live your life in this really present way. It's so strange. There's so much both and two truths and paradox, and in this life journey. And there years ago, our very beloved dog of many years passed away, and that was really devastating. Like I don't, when people are like, oh, I know it's pretty ridiculous, but I lost my beloved dog or cat, was like, it's not ridiculous. That is a deep, deep grief. And I very intentionally I went to my meditation cushion and I very intentionally went, I'm going to pay attention to what happens with this grief. Like, where does it go in your body? What does it do when you have it? It feels like you've been completely ripped open and shredded in the immediate experience. But then over the course of the next few weeks, it was like I could pinpoint exactly where the grief was in my body. It was in my head, or it was in my chest, or it was in my legs, or it was, that heaviness and all the different things you go through. And I just took this real observer stance with it, and it was so enlightening, and it took the fear. Oh, again, it was like my immediate response to those uncomfortable feelings was like, no, 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 I didn't know. No, don't want to do. And just consciously making that choice, again, we go back to the choice to go, don't resist it, just let it show up and be what it's going to be. And so each time after that with my mom, and I have a very dear friend who lost her child a week ago. She was pregnant at 24 months. And that really, like, this grief of a long life lived, and then this grief of never got to show up in the same space, and holding that for somebody else has been, it's just a really interesting, it's made the grief journey, it's impossible to shy away from. I mean, my curious brain is there anyway, always going, what's next? And so this is the thing that's kind of shown up recently for me is, and we go in and out of it, right? We go in and out of those spaces and the grief. And as you said earlier, it's there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think eventually it finds a place to settle in my physiology and my nervous system. I know that it's always going to be a tender place, and it's always going to get hit whenever there's a new grief that comes up. So it's never just the loss of my mother or just it's all the other losses that come in. And if I can let them come up and I can give them permission to be, I struggle less.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, grief is something I know firsthand a lot of. So, as I said to you before, I'm so sorry that you lost your mother. It's, even if it's been a long life lived and it's the right time and all of those things, it's still your mother. It's still a hard thing to go through. There's still, a path to be walked. But I am just so grateful that you have decided to come on, that you've decided to share, that you were so, open with us about your life. And I'm just always so grateful to our guests for taking the time to come on and obviously give hope to other people around what this journey can look like, and that it doesn't have to be the chaos that they're sitting in at the moment, that there is always another choice and there is always another way. So yeah, and thank you so much for being our guest this week. It's just incredible.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of The Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Diary of Discovery.